Hello everyone. In recent days, the world of the arts has once again quietly said goodbye to several familiar faces. Artists who once appeared on stage, on screen, and in the memories of many generations of audiences. Some brought laughter, some left behind melodies that cannot be forgotten. Others spent their entire lives telling stories that made us reflect. Today, we will look back at the lives of the artists who have just passed away and the marks they left on popular culture. If you appreciate memorial content like this, please press like and subscribe to the channel.
Thank you for being here with us.
Now, let us begin. Ernie Anastos, one of the familiar television news anchors of New York City for many decades, has passed away at the age of 82. His family and colleagues confirmed to the media that he died on March 11, 2026. His passing closes more than 4 decades of activity in the field of television journalism, where he was regarded as a trusted voice for millions of viewers in the New York area. Ernie Anastos was born on July 12, 1943, in Nashua, New Hampshire. He began his radio and television career in the 1970s and quickly became a familiar face on major news channels in New York. Throughout his career, he worked at several leading television stations such as WABC-TV, WCBS-TV, WWOR-TV, and Fox 5 New York. At Fox 5, Anastos became one of the station's main news anchors and remained associated with the evening news program for many years. His calm, clear, and professional presenting style helped him build strong credibility with viewers. Throughout his career, he reported on many important events of the city and the nation, becoming a familiar figure on New York television. His contributions were recognized through many prestigious awards, including more than 30 Emmy nominations and awards, along with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. He was also inducted into the New York State Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. For many colleagues and viewers, Ernie Anastos is remembered as a dedicated journalist and a news anchor who accompanied the city of New York through many important moments. His professional legacy continues to be mentioned as a standard of professionalism in television journalism. Country singer and songwriter Country Joe McDonald, leader of the band Country Joe and the Fish, and a figure closely associated with the famous anti-war song performed at Woodstock, passed away at the age of 84 on March 7, 2026, in Berkeley, California. The information was confirmed by his family and associates to the media, including Variety magazine. His passing closes more than half a century of artistic activity closely connected with a distinctive period of American culture. Country Joe McDonald, whose real name was Joseph Allen McDonald, was born on January 1, 1942 in Washington, D.C., and grew up in El Monte, California. Before pursuing music, he served in the United States Navy, stationed in Japan for 3 years. After leaving the military, he joined the folk music movement and student activities in Berkeley, California, a center of the anti-war movement during the 1960s. In 1965, McDonald and guitarist Barry "The Fish" Melton formed the band Country Joe and the Fish, which quickly became one of the representative groups of psychedelic rock in San Francisco. The band's music often reflected the social atmosphere during the Vietnam War era. His most famous song, I-Feel-Like-I'm-Fixin to Die Rag, written in 1965, became a symbol of the anti-war movement. His performance of the song at Woodstock in 1969, in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and its later appearance in the documentary film Woodstock, brought the name Country Joe McDonald to global audiences. Throughout his career, he released more than 30 albums and continued performing for many decades. For many music lovers, Country Joe McDonald was not only an artist, but also the musical voice of a generation. Actor Bobby J. Brown, a familiar face from the well-known television series The Wire, has passed away at the age of 61. The news was confirmed by his family and industry sources to the press, including The Guardian, in late February 2026. His passing brings to a close a steady acting career on American television, where he was known as a reliable supporting actor. Bobby J. Brown was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Before entering acting, he held many different jobs. These experiences helped shape his calm and natural demeanor, something that later became a recognizable trait in his performances. Throughout his career, Brown appeared in many television projects, often portraying police officers, law enforcement personnel, or characters within the justice system. His solid presence and restrained acting style made him a familiar figure in crime dramas and television series depicting urban life. The role most remembered by audiences was connected to the HBO series The Wire, which aired from 2002 to 2008. The show has been regarded by many critics as one of the most important television series of the 21st century, with its realistic portrayal of the city of Baltimore and social issues such as crime, politics, and the police system. Within that context, Bobby J. Brown's roles were not central, but they contributed to the authenticity of the series. Colleagues once described him as someone who brought warmth to the set and was a generous colleague. Bobby J. Brown's career is remembered for his dedication and professional attitude. He left a lasting mark as a dependable television actor of an important era in American television. Blues guitarist and singer John Hammond Jr., who spent more than 6 decades preserving and promoting traditional American blues, passed away at the age of 80 on November 11, 2023, in New York. The information was confirmed by his family to the media, including Rolling Stone. Hammond's passing brought to a close a long and enduring musical journey closely tied to the preservation of the core values of blues. John Hammond Jr. was born on November 13, 1942, in New York City. He was the son of John H. Hammond, the legendary music producer who helped discover many major artists such as Bob Dylan, Aretha Franklin, Bruce Springsteen, and Billie Holiday. Although he grew up in a musical environment with broad influence, Hammond Jr. chose his own path, becoming a performing artist devoted to traditional blues. He began his career in the early 1960s and signed with Columbia Records in 1962, releasing his debut album titled John Hammond. Over more than 60 years of activity, he released more than 30 albums and became one of the most respected blues artists in the music world. Hammond's performance style was often raw and direct, featuring guitar, harmonica, and a deep, raspy voice that carried the unmistakable mark of classic blues. His music was influenced by legendary artists such as Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and Howlin' Wolf. During his career, he also collaborated with many well-known musicians, including Duane Allman, Robbie Robertson, Dr. John, and Tom Waits. In 1984, Hammond won a Grammy Award for the album Blues Explosion. However, for many music lovers, his greatest value lay in keeping traditional blues alive and heard in the modern era. Throughout his life, John Hammond Jr. remained faithful to the music he loved, and that enduring dedication ultimately became his lasting legacy. Pop singer-songwriter Neil Sedaka, the writer of many hit songs such as Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, Calendar Girl, and Laughter in the Rain, passed away at the age of 85 on February 10, 2026. The information was confirmed by his family to the press, including Variety magazine. His passing closes a music career that lasted more than 6 decades, associated with many important phases of American pop music. Neil Sedaka was born on March 13, 1939, in Brooklyn, New York, into a Jewish immigrant family. From an early age, he showed musical talent and was accepted into the youth training program of the Juilliard School of Music, where he studied classical piano. This musical foundation later clearly influenced his songwriting style. During his teenage years, Sedaka was a member of the group The Tokens before beginning his solo career. He quickly rose to prominence in the late 1950s and early 1960s with songs such as Oh, Carol, Calendar Girl, and Happy Birthday Sweet 16. These hits helped him become one of the prominent pop voices of the early rock and roll era. His most famous song, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1962. Notably, Sedaka re-recorded the song in a ballad style in 1975, and the new version also reached #1, a rare achievement in the history of the chart. Throughout his career, Siddhartha sold more than 20 million records and had many songs reach the Billboard Top 40. He is considered one of the representative singer-songwriters of the first generation of rock and roll, with songs that are still remembered by audiences across many generations. Actor Eric Dane, widely known to television audiences for his role as Dr. Mark Sloan, McSteamy, in the famous medical drama series Grey's Anatomy, has passed away at the age of 52. The news was confirmed by his family to the press, and many international media outlets have reported the sad announcement. His passing has led the television fan community to express their sorrow for a familiar face of the small screen for nearly 2 decades. Eric Dane was born on November 9, 1972 in San Francisco, California. He began his acting career in the 1990s with guest appearances on television. Before achieving his major breakthrough, Dane appeared in several well-known series such as Charmed, Gideon's Crossing, and Married with Children. His name truly became widely recognized in 2006 when he joined the ABC series Grey's Anatomy, the character Doctor. Mark Sloan, a talented plastic surgeon with a strong personality and confident demeanor, quickly became one of the most beloved characters among viewers. The nickname McSteamy was given to the character as a counterpart to McDreamy, the character Derek Shepherd. Throughout many seasons of the show, Mark Sloan was not only portrayed as a charming figure, but was also developed with emotional depth. His love story with Lexi Gray became one of the relationships most remembered by audiences of the series. The character later died in Season 9 after being seriously injured in the plane crash in Season 8, one of the moments that deeply moved viewers. In addition to Grey's Anatomy, Eric Dane also participated in many other television and film projects. However, the image of McSteamy remains the role most closely associated with his name. In the memories of many viewers, Eric Dane will always be remembered as an actor who brought a special presence to television screens. His role has become an unforgettable part of the history of Grey's Anatomy. Washington, D.C. in the years following World War II was a city layered with history. Government buildings and quiet neighborhoods stood side by side, creating a rhythm of life that felt both solemn and calm. It was in this city, on November 21st, 1945, that Goldie Jean Hawn was born. At the time, there was no sign that this child would later become one of the familiar faces of American film and television. Yet the environment in which she grew up quietly prepared the ground for that future. Her father, Edward Rutledge Hawn, was a professional musician. He performed in bands and often practiced at home. Because of this, the sound of instruments and rehearsal melodies became a familiar part of family life. For Goldie, music was not something distant. It was simply the rhythm of everyday life. Her mother, Laura Steinhoff Hawn, was both a businesswoman and someone deeply connected to the performing arts. She operated a jewelry shop, while at the same time managing a dance school where neighborhood children learned their first movements. As a result, Goldie's childhood unfolded among music, dance rehearsals, and the patient preparation required by the performing arts. Later, many people summarize that environment with a simple observation. Creativity was not a distant aspiration. It was the air she breathed. For Goldie, creativity was simply the atmosphere of daily life. At the age of 3, Goldie began learning dance at her mother's dance school. At first, it was only an extracurricular activity, but the training quickly became a serious routine. She studied ballet, tap dance, and other styles. Long hours of practice introduced her to one of the most basic principles of art: repetition. A movement performed dozens of times, a step that had to land precisely on every beat, and grace that appeared only after the body had learned discipline. Through that process, she developed patience, physical control, and a strong sense of rhythm. More importantly, Goldie began to experience the stage as a living space, a place where the energy of the performer and the reaction of the audience are always connected. Her teenage years were spent at Montgomery Blair High School in Maryland. There, Goldie continued performing in school productions and local recitals. At the same time, she often helped her mother guide younger students at the dance school. It was during this period that another ability began to emerge clearly. Not just dance, she had a natural instinct for comedy. A slightly exaggerated gesture, an unexpected facial expression, or a spontaneous moment could make the audience laugh. People around her noticed it early. Goldie seemed able to sense the reaction of an audience with surprising accuracy. As many later described it, she could sense when an audience was ready to laugh. They were only small stages and modest rehearsal rooms, but it was in those places that something important began to form. The first connection between a performer and an audience. A connection that would stay with Goldie Hawn for the rest of her life. In 1964, Goldie Hawn faced a choice that many young people encounter: continue along a safe path or step into a journey filled with uncertainty. After graduating from Montgomery Blair High School, she enrolled at American University in Washington, D.C., studying drama and acting. On paper, it was a sensible path. A formal training program, a stable environment, and a future with fewer risks. But after only a short time, Goldie realized something was not right. She sat in classes analyzing scripts, listening to lectures about theatrical theory, yet the familiar feeling of a real stage, the lights, the movement, the breathing rhythm of an audience, was completely absent. For Goldie, art was not something that could be fully understood through lectures, and then she made a difficult decision. She left university. There was no certain plan, no promise of success, only a vague belief that she needed to learn the craft somewhere else, on real stages. The years that followed were not easy. Goldie began accepting every performing opportunity she could find in the Washington area. She stood in chorus lines, appeared in local theaters, and worked with summer stock theater companies, summer troupes, where rehearsal schedules were intense and everything moved at a relentless pace. Some days she had to learn an entirely new dance routine in just a few hours. Some nights, the theater seats were nearly empty. The pay was small, the work was unstable. But it was where Goldie learned something no classroom could teach: the endurance of an artist. Then she left Washington for New York, the city where thousands of young performers arrived each year, hoping to find a single opportunity. There, Goldie worked as a go-go dancer in clubs. There were no longer formal stages or carefully prepared productions, only flashing lights, loud music, and crowded rooms where performers had to maintain their energy for hours at a time. Audiences came and went constantly. If a performer was not engaging enough, people would simply turn away. In that environment, Goldie learned an important lesson. The stage is not always glamorous. Sometimes it is loud, cramped, and unforgiving, a place where the performer must hold the audience's attention on their own. Also in 1964, she appeared at the New York World's Fair, an international event that attracted millions of visitors from around the world. It was one of the largest stages she had stood on at that point in her life. Yet, even under brighter lights, Goldie was still just a young performer trying to find her place. Those years did not bring fame. There were no awards, no newspaper headlines celebrating her. But they brought something else: experience and stage instinct. Goldie gradually learned how to read the atmosphere of a room. She began to recognize when the audience was focused, when they were starting to lose patience, and when a small gesture could pull their attention back again. Years later, when Goldie Hawn appeared on television and audiences were captivated by her natural presence, it looked like a sudden breakthrough. But in reality, long before Hollywood knew her name, Goldie had already spent years standing on small stages, watching and learning one fundamental rule of the profession. She studied the relationship between artist and audience, a fragile relationship, yet the foundation of every performance. And it was during those difficult years that Goldie Hawn truly began to understand it. By the late 1960s, after years of performing on small stages and in noisy clubs across New York, Goldie Hawn was still simply a young performer trying to hold on to her place. Performing allowed her to survive, but it had not yet opened any clear path forward. In the entertainment industry, there were many people like her, hardworking, persistent, and still waiting for a real opportunity. Then, that opportunity appeared in 1968, when Goldie was invited to join NBC's television program, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. It was not an ordinary comedy show. Laugh-In was built with an extremely fast pace, constant quick cuts, and short, sharp lines of dialogue. The program reflected the shifting culture of America in the late 1960s, a turbulent period when comedy, politics, and popular culture began blending together. When she entered the show, Goldie was not a star. She was hired in a fairly modest role, a dancer and supporting performer. In a program filled with more experienced comedians, her position at first was simply a minor one. But even in that small role, Goldie began creating a distinct presence of her own. Audiences soon noticed a particular image on screen, a blonde girl with a wide smile, slightly innocent eyes, and a very recognizable laugh. In the show's segments, Goldie often appeared in colorful costumes, sometimes with bright body paint, dancing or stepping into the frame to deliver a short line before breaking into laughter. At first glance, the image seemed simple. A cheerful girl, slightly naive, who appeared to bring light energy to the show. But behind that image was a carefully considered choice. Goldie understood something clearly. Audiences are often drawn to characters who seem carefree and uncomplicated. So she created a character who appeared innocent, joyful, almost naive. But in reality, it was a very tightly controlled performance. She wasn't playing a foolish character, she was performing someone pretending to be one. She was not simply portraying a foolish girl. Goldie was performing a character who appeared naive, and that deliberate choice gave her image an unexpected depth. In the environment of Laugh-In, where each segment lasted only a few seconds before shifting to another scene, performers had to capture the audience's attention immediately. There was no time for characters to slowly develop an impression. Everything happened in a single, brief moment. Goldie had already grown familiar with that pressure during her years as a go-go dancer and performer on small stages. Now, those skills began to work in her favor. Gradually, her appearances became one of the most recognizable elements of the show. Audiences did not only remember the punchlines, they remembered her distinctive laugh and the bright energy she brought into each segment. The show continued airing until 1970. By the time Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In came to an end, Goldie Hawn was no longer an unknown figure in the entertainment world. She had become one of the most familiar faces on American television. What is striking, however, is that this turning point did not come from a single major role or one explosive moment. It came from small details, the right expression at the right time, a laugh, a character that seemed simple but was built with subtle care. After many years standing in the shadows, Goldie Hawn had finally stepped into the light of television. But that was only the beginning. When Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In turned Goldie Hawn into a familiar face on American television, many people believed the road ahead of her would become easier. But television and cinema are two very different worlds. Fame on the small screen could not guarantee the same welcome from the doors of Hollywood. In the late 1960s, film studios still viewed Goldie with caution. In the eyes of many producers, she was simply the cheerful blonde girl from a comedy show. It was an image that attracted attention, but it also made it easy for people to underestimate her real acting ability. Nevertheless, in 1968, Goldie received the opportunity to step into film with the one and only genuine original family band. Her role was very modest, more like a first test in a new environment. On set, she had to relearn many things: the working rhythm different from television, how to maintain energy in front of the camera, and the patience required for scenes that were filmed again and again. But only 1 year later, a larger opportunity appeared. In 1969, with the film Cactus Flower, Goldie played Toni Simmons, a young woman who accidentally becomes involved in a complicated relationship. This was no longer a brief comedic character from television. The role required a delicate balance between innocence, genuine emotion, and the rhythm of comedy. She stood beside two major names of cinema, Walter Matthau and Ingrid Bergman. For a young actress who had just entered a new environment, it was not a small challenge. Goldie had to prove that she could bring more than laughter, that she could hold the emotional depth of a character within a feature film. The result went far beyond initial expectations. Her performance in Cactus Flower earned Goldie Hawn the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. When she stepped onto the Oscar stage, she was only 24 years old. It was one of the earliest major victories in the career of a film actor. but the award did not immediately make everything easy. After the spotlight of the Oscar, Goldie still had to continue proving herself through each project. In 1970, she appeared in There's a Girl in My Soup, starring alongside Peter Sellers. The film gave her the opportunity to continue developing her comedic style, but it also required a more natural and restrained performance compared with television. In 1972, Goldie joined Butterflies Are Free. The film explored a more emotional story, allowing her to show acting ability beyond simple comedy. By 1974, she collaborated with a young director who was still little known at the time, Steven Spielberg, in the film The Sugarland Express. Her role in this film carried a tone very different from what audiences had seen from Goldie, a character filled with tension, acting on powerful emotions, and sometimes desperation. 1 year later, in 1975, Goldie appeared in Shampoo, starring with Warren Beatty. The film was set in late 1960s Los Angeles and reflected a society changing rapidly, where relationships and personal values were becoming more complicated. By 1978, she starred in Foul Play alongside Chevy Chase. The film became a box office success, confirming Goldie's position in Hollywood's mainstream entertainment comedy. While her career continued to move forward, her personal life also went through many changes. In 1969, Goldie married dancer Gus Triconis. The marriage lasted several years, but eventually ended in divorce in 1976. Also in 1976, Goldie entered a new marriage with musician Bill Hudson. In the years that followed, they had 2 children, Oliver Hudson and Kate Hudson, names that would later enter the entertainment industry themselves. The 1970s, therefore, became a particularly important period in the life of Goldie Hawn. On screen, she gradually established her place in Hollywood, but behind the lights, those were still years of turbulence where career, marriage, and personal life were all changing at the same time. And Goldie kept moving forward, one role at a time, one film after another, in an industry that has never truly been easy for anyone. Entering the 1980s, Goldie Hawn was no longer a new face in Hollywood. She already had an Oscar, several successful films, and a solid position within the comedy genre. But behind that familiar image, there was still an invisible boundary. In the studio system of that time, actors, especially women, rarely had the power to decide the stories they told. Goldie began to feel that clearly, and she did not want to remain in the position of someone who simply waited for scripts to be handed to her. An opportunity for change appeared in 1980 with the film Private Benjamin. In this project, Goldie did not only take on the lead role of Judy Benjamin, a young woman who unexpectedly joins the US Army after a personal shock. More importantly, she also participated as a producer. That was not a simple step. For a female actress to step into film production at that time meant entering financial discussions, script decisions, and the kinds of risks she had never carried before. Private Benjamin tells the story of a woman forced to leave her familiar life and face a completely new environment. In a certain sense, the character's journey also reflected Goldie herself during that period, stepping out of a safe zone to try a different role. The film was released in 1980 and quickly became a box office phenomenon. The revenue exceeded $100 million, a very large number for that time. This success was not only commercial, it confirmed that Goldie Hawn was not simply a comedy actress loved by audiences. She could participate in creating a film from the very beginning. Her performance in Private Benjamin also brought her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. This time, it was not in a supporting category, but in the central role of the film. However, success on screen did not make Goldie's personal life easier. The early 1980s were also a period when she faced several private upheavals. First was the death of her father, Edward Rutledge Hawn, in the early 1980s. The man who had brought music into her childhood home, the one who had quietly supported his daughter's earliest steps in the arts, was now gone. The loss came at a time when Goldie's career was at its busiest. At the same time, her second marriage to musician Bill Hudson was gradually coming to an end. The two officially divorced in 1982. The separation was not only a change in her personal life, it also directly affected the family and their 2 children. Amid those changes, Goldie continued working. In 1982, she appeared in the film Best Friends, starring alongside Burt Reynolds. The film explored the story of long-term relationships and the challenges couples face over time, a theme that seemed to reflect in some way her own personal experiences. After the divorce, Goldie's life began to move in a new direction. It was during this period that she began a relationship with Kurt Russell, an actor she had known from earlier years. The relationship at first developed quietly, away from excessive media attention. The 1980s, therefore, became a meaningful period for Goldie Hawn. Professionally, she crossed an important boundary, from being an actress to someone involved in the creative decisions of a film. But behind the lights of Hollywood, these were also years marked by loss, separation, and profound changes in her personal life. None of those things stopped Goldie. They only made the road ahead more complicated. Entering the 1990s, Hollywood had clearly changed. New faces appeared constantly, cinematic trends shifted rapidly, and the positions of many stars who had once stood out in the previous decade began to be tested. In that context, Goldie Hawn's career was no longer a story of sudden breakthroughs. This was a period of adaptation and endurance. In 1990, Goldie appeared in the action-comedy film Bird on a Wire, starring alongside Mel Gibson. She played Marianne Graves, a lawyer who is unexpectedly drawn into a dangerous chase when she encounters a former lover living under the Witness Protection Program. This role forced Goldie to step outside her familiar comfort zone. It was no longer only light comedic situations. The character also had to confront action sequences and tense situations that continued throughout the film. 1 year later, in 1991, Goldie appeared in the film Deceived. This marked a notable shift in her career. In the film, she played Adrienne Saunders, a woman who gradually discovers that the man she married may not be the person he once appeared to be. The story begins with what seems like a peaceful family life, but then unfolds into a chain of discoveries filled with suspicion and fear. The role required Goldie to portray emotions quite different from her familiar screen image: anxiety, uncertainty, and a sense of being threatened. By 1992, she participated in one of the most unusual projects of her career: Death Becomes Her. The film was directed by Robert Zemeckis, with Meryl Streep and Bruce Willis in the cast. Goldie played Helen Sharp, a woman obsessed with youth and beauty who confronts the character played by Meryl Streep in a sharply satirical rivalry. The film became famous for its bold visual effects, later winning the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. However, what allowed the film to be remembered over time lay in the tension and dark comedy between the characters. Also in 1992, Goldie appeared in House Sitter, starring alongside Steve Martin. In the film, she played Gwen Phillips, an impulsive woman who unexpectedly enters the life of an architect and creates a series of unpredictable misunderstandings. The film carried a lighter rhythm, allowing audiences to see again Goldie's familiar comedic style, quick, subtle, and full of energy. By 1996, Goldie appeared in the film The First Wives Club, starring alongside Bette Midler and Diane Keaton. The film tells the story of 3 women who had once been abandoned by their husbands and decide to reclaim their independence. The production quickly became a major success, earning more than $180 million worldwide. Beyond its commercial success, the film also touched on a theme that many audiences could relate to: the position of women in a society that often judges them through age and appearance. Also in 1996, Goldie participated in the film Everyone Says I Love You, a musical by Woody Allen. The film was shot in New York and Venice, where the actors, even though they were not professional singers, performed their own vocal parts. Goldie took part in elaborately staged singing and dancing sequences, demonstrating that she still retained the flexibility of an artist who had once begun her career on the dance stage. But alongside film projects, the decade also brought personal loss. In the early 1990s, her mother, Laura Steinhoff Horn, passed away. The woman who had opened a dance school and introduced Goldie to the world of performance when she was only 3 years old was now gone. It was a profound loss, not only for a daughter, but also for an artist who had grown up within the artistic environment her mother had created. Therefore, the 1990s for Goldie Hawn were not only about new films. It was a period in which she continued searching for her place in a changing Hollywood, while also facing quieter shifts in her personal life. A period that was not especially loud, but filled with the challenges of time. Entering the early 2000s, Goldie Hawn had already spent more than 3 decades in the film industry. Her roles, awards, and successful films had made her a familiar face in Hollywood. But instead of continuing to appear constantly on screen, Goldie began to slow down. In 2001, she appeared in the film Town and Country. The project featured a well-known ensemble cast and told stories revolving around complex relationships within New York's upper class. Although the film faced many difficulties during production, Goldie maintained her familiar acting style, natural, gentle, yet always carrying a subtle comedic rhythm. A year later, in 2002, she appeared in The Banger Sisters, starring alongside Susan Sarandon. The film tells the story of 2 women who once lived in the vibrant rock and roll world of previous decades and meet again after many years apart. Goldie's character, Suzette, still retains the free-spirited and somewhat rebellious energy of her youth, while her former friend has chosen a more stable life. The film raises a familiar but not easily answered question. How much do people change as time passes? After this film, Goldie stepped away from cinema for about 15 years. There was no major announcement, no official farewell. She simply chose to spend time on other things in life. One of her most important new directions began in 2003, when Goldie founded the Hawn Foundation. From this came the educational program Mind Up, a project that combines mindfulness, emotional regulation, and knowledge of neuroscience. The program was designed to help children understand how the brain works, learn to manage their emotions, and develop their ability to focus. For Goldie, this was not a symbolic charitable activity. In many interviews, she spoke about periods in which she had to face anxiety and panic attacks when her career suddenly grew too quickly. Those experiences made her care more deeply about mental health. Over time, Goldie found balance through methods such as meditation, breathing techniques, mindfulness, yoga, and a lifestyle focused on a balanced diet. As one observation often repeated in conversations about her states, meditation helped her remain grounded despite the unpredictability of Hollywood. Alongside her social activities, Goldie's personal life also entered a more stable period. Her relationship with Kurt Russell has lasted for more than 40 years, becoming one of Hollywood's rare, long-lasting couples. Their family includes the children Oliver, Kate, and Wyatt. And over time, Goldie also entered a new role, a grandmother. Although she stepped away from the screen for many years, Goldie did not completely disappear from cinema. In 2017, she returned with the comedy film Snatched. Her appearance reminded audiences that Goldie Hawn's natural comedic timing was still intact. 3 years later, in 2020, she and Kurt Russell appeared together in the film The Christmas Chronicles 2. This time, the two played Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus, presenting a warm and family-oriented image. Today, Goldie divides her time between California and Colorado. Her life revolves around yoga sessions, meditation, charitable activities, and time spent with family. There is no longer a packed filming schedule, no longer the pressure of major projects, but her influence continues in a different way. After many decades in front of the camera, Goldie Hawn is remembered not only as an Oscar-winning actress or a comedic icon of Hollywood. She is also recognized as a producer, an advocate for mental health, and an artist who chose to expand her legacy beyond the screen. A legacy that does not exist only in films, but also in the way one person continues to influence the world, even after the stage lights have grown softer.